Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
I've got 4:30, and that back there says 4:30. Good to have you all here tonight. Um, Anybody doing something special for Independence Day tomorrow? Who's going? Anybody in here going with us to San Diego? The Butchers. I know also the Edwards, Bill and Sandra Edwards. Is that right? I'm not sure. Yeah, yeah, they're going. And I got room for about 8 more. And if you wanted to go, I've got a list of all the things that you can do. Or you can get there, set up a shade, kick your lawn chair out, and just sit for hours and hours and hours if that's all you want to do. Or there's, what's that? No, not that. But there's a lot of things to do right there along the waterfront there at Seaport Village and right through there, and so that's where we're going to be, and so that'll be a lot of fun. And only got about 8 places, maybe 10 places left, and so if you're interested, talk to me after the service, and we're going to leave earlier. We said we were going to leave at 10. We're going to now leave at 9:30, and something about stopping at that outlet mall on top of the mountain between here. What are you shaking your head for? No, for you can't walk. Oh, well, just sit by the ladies' room. And all right. What prayer requests do you have? I want to add on here. I haven't gotten an update, but my buddy Robbie sits right down here. Robbie was in the hospital earlier this week with a bowel obstruction, and haven't heard if he's released or not. I asked him to, but haven't heard back. Okay. Other prayer requests or praises that you have? Heard? Mark Camara? That's somebody different. That's different than, yeah, that's who I'm talking about. That's who I'm talking about. Okay. That's him. Okay. So he's in the hospital? Wow. Okay. That is not a good situation. All right. Pray for Mark. Sir, Doug? Yeah. school in the fall. Yeah, this is a long time, long time prayer being answered here, and they are out of town right now on vacation, right? And they, huh? Oh, okay. You decided to stay back, hold down the fort. Okay. Where'd they go? Idaho. Oh, okay. You didn't want to escape the heat? Okay. All right. But it is good. He actually filled out a connection card, said he'd like to talk to us about church membership and that sort of thing. So that's awesome. Those are. Well, when you pray for your kids and you see something like that, boy, you're like, that's right. James. Good. Uh huh. Okay. That's right. Yep. Uh oh. All right. I want to. Dave? That's good. 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 Did the injection and that seemed to help? I see. Gotcha. Okay. Y'all continue to pray for Cindy, and that is a good report. I want to welcome Connor back over here. I met Connor just a minute ago, and he said, I visit churches, and he said, I saw on y'all's website that you have a 4:30 Bible study. He said, I just go anytime I can go somewhere to get a Bible study. And so there he is. So welcome to our Bible study here, Connor. And he regularly attends a Baptist church down the street here, Foothill Southern, and so we welcome you here for our 4:30 Bible study. Promise you, you're the youngest man in the room. All right. Any other prayer requests? Yes, sir. Okay. 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 Any? Yeah. Melissa's glad you're home. Yeah, well, that's the kind we like, an uneventful kind. Yeah. Um, yep, it'll be fun. Just if y'all see the bus drifting, huh? Yeah, I'm gonna do my best to sleep in the morning. I know it's a wasted cause because I won't be able to, but nonetheless, I'll try. I thought it's. y- Oh, okay. I'm sure there'll be. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some folks who'll do that. Yeah, all the women folk do that. The guys never remember it. Yeah, heard that. Yep, yep, yeah, yeah. Good, good. Yeah. I don't know if you all know that Mike Stafford was a TV anchor. That was his career, and so imagine somebody going long. Of course, very used to public speaking, right? And I heard that. That's good. Good, good. I'm actually going to be talking to him about leading a life group this fall. He and his wife are just on fire for the Lord, and it's exciting to see what God's doing in their lives. Absolutely. All right, sir. A real one, like uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Amen. I thought you were kidding at first, looking for a peacock. Did you find? Oh, okay. I know a few peacocks. Wow. Can you? I don't know if I ever would. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, if I hear that around my house, I'll call you, James, and say it's up here. We are in 1 Kings chapter 17. And didn't we learn about Elijah a little bit last week? I thought so. Oh, yeah, this other prophet. Ezekiel, that's right. Elijah, Ezekiel, what's the difference? Honest mistake. I was thinking who do we, yeah, you're right. It was Ezekiel. Elijah, Elisha, Ezekiel, they're all the same, right? Disciples, apostles, epistles, whatever. Elijah is 1 Kings chapter 17. And if you remember in the history of the kingdom of Israel, after Solomon's death, there was a split in the kingdom. And Jeroboam was the king in the north. And he was setting up alternate places of worship because he was afraid that the people would go down to Jerusalem to worship and not come back up. It's like these northerners who visit the south and they don't want to ever leave the south because they found heaven down in the south. And so but no, that was legitimately was his concern, was that they would come to Jerusalem and not return to their own homeland and in the northern kingdom. And so he set up these alternate places of worship, and of course they were places of idol worship. They were unsanctioned by God. He put idols there and golden calves and he set those up all throughout Israel there. And the Bible says about the northern tribes, who was the worst. You remember who the worst king of the northern tribes was? Is Ahab, right? Remember Ahab? 1 Kings 16:13 tells us that he did more evil in the sight of the Lord than all that were before him. What a great testimony to go down in Bible history. I would rather have David. All the kings were compared to David, and they did good, but they didn't do as good as David. Well, this guy was evil, but he wasn't as evil as Ahab. Ahab was the worst of the worst of the worst. Ahab, he didn't marry well either. you remember? A lot of guys, they say, well, I married up. Ahab didn't. Remember? What was her name? Jezebel. Jezebel was Ahab's wife. She was a Sidonian princess, and so she added further idolatry to the land of Israel. She brought her idols in, and she began to implement Baal worship, B-A-A-L, Baal worship there, all throughout Israel. Baal was the god of fertility, the god of rain, the god of harvest. She wasn't just satisfied with setting up her false gods. She tried to eliminate the worship of Jehovah God. She tried to eliminate the worship of the one true God. And she even, remember, had prophets of God killed. You remember that? I mean, this was some bad kind of woman. The worst of the worst of the worst. And it's in that context when this horrible queen is killing God's prophets that Elijah shows up. Okay? That's the context of what we're going to see tonight. I want you to understand how that was. So we're in 1 Kings chapter 17, and this first point here I've got titled Standing Before God. Standing before God. Do you have that there, Dave? Good. 1 Kings 17 and verse number 1. And Elisha the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel lives, notice the next 4 words there. Before whom I stand. There shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. Elijah had no trouble standing before that wicked King Ahab. Why? Because he had stood before the Lord first. You see? He got his strength. He got what he needed, the grace to stand and have the courage and to not be afraid by standing before the Lord. So Elijah goes to Ahab and he brings the word of the Lord. And his prophecy is that there's not going to be any more rain for 3.5 years. No more rain until he says so. That's pretty direct, pretty powerful, pretty in-your-face kind of thing. And so he boldly goes to Ahab and it is a pronouncement of judgment upon Israel. You have gone into idolatry. You are worshiping these false gods. And therefore, God is not going to allow you to go unchecked. God loves His people. And again and again and again, you look through all of Hebrew history, and you see where His people would go into idolatry, and He would do what? He would chasten them, right? He would do something to usually, oftentimes, He would bring in a heathen invading army to put his own people in their place until they begin to cry out for mercy, and then He'd finally deliver them there. So you see first here, Elijah standing before the king. Second, time to leave. 1 Kings chapter 17 and verses 2 and through 4. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Get you hence, and turn eastward, and what? What's the next word? Hide. Hide. So he just stood before King Ahab. He said, Listen to me. God's going to judge you. You hear me, he says? God's going to judge you, and He's going to judge your wicked wife, and He's going to judge the nation whom you have brought into idolatry, and that's the way it's going to be. It's not going to rain for 3.5 years. And now God says, okay, you've upset him, time to get out of there. So He says, go hide yourself by the brook Cherith. That's before Jordan. And it shall be that you shall drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens, this is interesting, the ravens to feed you there. So right away, the Lord tells Elijah to flee to this place called Cherith and hide there. It was at that place, at Cherith, that God promised him that He would provide for him. He said, you go there, and when you get there, I'm going to take care of you there. Now, Cherith was a very isolated place. It was a place all by itself. Figuratively, we could say this. Cherith is a place where you're completely cut off and you're totally dependent upon God and His resources. You ever been in a place of Cherith? You ever been in a place where you're cut off from everything to where you say, okay, Lord, you better come through on this or I ain't going to make it. That is Cherith. It's that place of isolation where you're totally cut off and you're totally dependent upon the Lord. Before Elijah was able to stand on Mount Carmel and their challenge, the 800 false prophets that he would later do, he first had to learn some lessons in that isolated place called Cherith. Can you think of anybody else in the Bible who was separated for a season before God used them to do something mighty? Moses. Where was Moses? Where? In the wilderness or in the desert, right? I remember reading as a kid growing up wilderness, and I grew up in Tennessee, and I thought wilderness meant like the woods lot back behind the house there. That's not it. It's like the woods lot out here south of 40th. That woods lot. It's all desert there. That's the wilderness. Moses was there. How long was he there? 40 years. 40 years of theological training, if you will. 40 years separated before God used him and called him to go and deliver his people Israel out of the bondage and the slavery there in Egypt. You might not think about this one, but he was. Joseph in the Old Testament, he was isolated. He was in prison for a number of years there before he ever got out, yet faithful to the Lord during his time in prison there. Then he became what? The second in command of all of Egypt, just under the Pharaoh there. Jesus was the same way. He was tempted in the wilderness for a time, having not eaten and drinking, and was fasting there. Jesus oftentimes, throughout his ministry though, you'd find him drawing aside. I'm reminded of the story. You remember when he had sent the disciples out, and they had done great things, and he had empowered them to do miracles. And they saw people respond to what they were doing, and they came back rejoicing at what they had done. Right after that, the Bible says that Jesus took them away to a solitary place. I get the impression there that they were too filled with themselves. They were all, and he's like, listen, we need to get our perspective right. We need to bring, you need to get your head screwed on straight. You went out there, oh, look what we did. This is awesome. Look, wow, this is incredible. Fellas, come on. We need to knock you down a notch. And that's that isolated place, that Cherith place, that place separated all alone, a place where you're totally dependent upon God, where if God doesn't come through, you're there, and you have nowhere to go. Paul, the Apostle Paul, you may not realize this, right after he got saved, he spent 11 years in obscurity in the desert. 11 years. What did he do down there? The Bible doesn't record anything. We don't know. We just know that he was isolated, separated in that place all alone there. 11 years is a long time. And then finally God says, all right, I'll let you now go stand before kings and preach to Gentiles. That is what a Cherith is. A Cherith is that time where God says, you know what? I need to do some refining. I need to teach you some lessons. I need to take you to the place to where, I'm not there yet, Dave. I need to take you to the place to where it's just going to be me and you, because I may have something for you. You know, sometimes God will take us to a place of Cherith, this isolated place, maybe for greater ministry, maybe to prepare us for something of greater significance in our life. Maybe we think of greater ministry and we think of blessing, but maybe greater hardship coming, and God knows those are coming. And so there's those times when God will separate us aside and put us in those places of isolation. Maybe you can look back over your life, and there were times, there might have been a lot of people around you, but it was really a time when you were all alone. You may have felt like, you ever felt lonely in a crowd? That's what I'm talking about. that place of Cherith. Cherith actually means it's a word that speaks of to cut away, to separate. God often does this to remove us. Maybe we've got some worldliness in us, and God says, you know what? You've got too much of the world in you. You're not submitting to me like I want you to submit to me, and I'm going to separate you aside for a while to cut away some of the worldliness that's in you there. A Cherith experience is often there to humble us, to teach us greater dependence upon Him. I remember when God took Melissa and I out of Tennessee and took us up to Chicago where Yankees live, and we didn't know a soul up there, not a soul, and took a huge pay cut before we went up there. Back in the late 90s, I had a job, a union job. A take-home check back in the 90s was $1,000 a week take-home check. That's after taxes. Great job back. That's a pretty decent job today, even with inflation. But back then it was a really, really good job. And we went up there and we moved to Gary, Indiana. Anybody know anything about Gary, Indiana? Okay. Yeah, like 50 years ago. Anybody know anything about Gary, Indiana today? At one time, it was listed as the murder capital of the world. Okay? It is not a destination city, that's for sure. Not at all. And there we were, and we were living in a little 10 by 55 1965 trailer. That's the trailer that we brought Jackson and Jacob home from the hospital in, that we lived in there. And I was in Bible college full time, and we were away from all of our family. They were 7 hours away. I tried to get away from my mother-in-law, and she knew how to get there. What's funny is they never visited us until we had kids, and it was like every other month. They just, we want to come see y'all. Who's y'all? You don't want to come see me. You want to come see those kids anyway. But honestly, there were times, it was a place of isolation for us. It was a place where the culture is different than the little podunk towns that we grew up in Tennessee. Moved to Chicago, good grief. And then not only the culture, but we moved up there and poor as church mice. Took a huge pay cut, full-time employee to make a living, to be able to get by, full-time Bible college student, and working like 30 hours of ministry on the weekends in addition to all of that. And it was a crazy, isolated time. But can I tell you, had it not been for that time, I wouldn't be your pastor today. It was a little Bible college, HAC, House Anderson College. But it's in Indiana. But it's up near Chicago there. And it was an isolated time. Maybe some of you, if you had time, if we had time, you would be able to say, you know what, Pastor, there's been chapters in my life where God has brought me aside. Or maybe you're in that place now. God is bringing me aside, and He's teaching me, and He's training me, and He's cutting some things out of my life that need to be removed from my life, or that they needed to be removed from my life in order to be a more usable vessel for His glory. And that's that place of Cherith. It's a place of greater, to prepare for greater ministry, to prepare maybe even for unseen difficulties. So we saw, first, standing before the king. 2, time to leave. 3, the lessons that we learned there. What are the lessons that Elijah learned at Cherith? Well, 1 Kings chapter 17, verses 5 and 6. Look at it, please. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. Did you get that? He went there and he did it. Okay, he obeyed the Lord. For he went and he dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. There's 3 things I want us to learn here. Number 1 is obedience. Obedience. Elijah just obeyed. God said go, and Elijah went. There was no debate. Cherith, I've heard about Cherith. That's like in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you get to nowhere and turn left, and there you are. I mean, Cherith, that's an isolate. He didn't do that. He obeyed. He went. And folks, can I say, when God gives a command, what should be our response? Immediate and complete obedience. Immediate. That's what I expected of my children when they were little. Hey, do this. No, don't dilly-dally. No, go take out the trash. Well, just as soon as I get done with this, what'd you say? No. Get up now. Go. And the trash is not taken out until a new bag is put back in the can. Right? Do it immediately and completely. That's what we are. I believe that's what parents should be teaching their kids, right? All the grandparents, yeah, that's right, right? And but can I say to you, that's what God should expect of us as well. No attitude, no lip. Who are you to tell me? God? You know? Elijah went. There was obedience. God commanded it. He did what he was told. And the thing about it, I like the simplicity of it. It's just, okay. I've told you the difference between my boys and my daughter. My boys, very strong, opinionated, determined, stubborn, even when they were little. You know, the boys, you know, we purposefully did not childproof our house. If there was something breakable, we left it on the coffee table. We wanted to teach the kids, no. I know parents childproof their house and all that, you know. No, you teach them. Anyway, I should have been born 100 years ago. But I don't fit into today's parenting at all. Not at all. But the boys, you know, you tell the boys and they'd reach for something. And they're just little toddlers, just barely learning they can't even talk yet. Okay? But they're just learning their independence. And they're looking at it. We've already told them no. And they're looking at it, and they're reaching for it, and they're looking at you at the same time. They're reaching for it, and they're looking at you. And they're looking at you. And you say, no. And they keep moving towards it. So what do? Huh? Take your little hand, a little pudgy fat hand. You turn it red. Right? I know today that's terrible. I can say that to this crowd, the Sunday morning crowd. I'm turning him in. Well, they're 21 and 22. Go ahead. They survived it. Both of the boys, same way. Emma, same. I don't remember if it's the exact same thing or what it was, but I remember the scenario. And I said, Emma, no. And I said it good and stern. She went, a little lip pooched out, and she walked away. I looked at Melissa. I said, did you see that? That's so different than the other two. And we're like, yes, we got an easy one. Because the other two are not. Jackson and Jacob are only 13 months apart. And Jacob quickly got to be the size of Jackson. So Melissa, everywhere she went, are they twins? Are they twins? And of course, it didn't help the fact that she dressed them the same. Are they twins? And people later in life, she said, you know, Melissa, when you had those little ones, I used to feel so sorry for you. With the two boys, Jackson, they were 100% boy, that's for sure. I like the simplicity of Elijah just going and doing. Just going and doing. I wish I could say every time the Lord has spoken to my heart about a matter, oh yeah, that's what I've done. But I think all of us know that some of our own self-will gets involved. And we play mental debate with God. You know, we justify it. God says, you know, not verbally. I don't even like saying God says. We feel the Lord leading. How's that? And God, if God speaks, He speaks through what? Through His Word, right? Through His Word. But we've since the Lord leading, you know, God didn't write in the Bible, move to Chicago, but we believe the Lord was leading us up there, right? You get that. And so the Lord's leading you in a way, and the Spirit of God's convicting you in that way, and you play these, well, Lord, if I do it that way, you ever done that? Elijah did not do that. Elijah, the simplicity of his obedience, I love that. Jesus said in John chapter 15 and verse 14, He said, you are my friends if you do what? What I command. Again, just the simplicity, that obedience, the simplicity of obedience. When God commands us to do something, we should act on it. And by the way, we don't do it out of fear. You know, eventually you say, did you rear your kids that way the entire time just out of fear? No, eventually I wanted to get them to the point to where they didn't disobey me because they respected and they didn't want to do anything because they honored and respected mom and dad. They loved mom and dad, and so they didn't want to disappoint mom and dad. That should be our response to God. God, I love you because you first loved me. And thereby, I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do anything to hurt you. I don't want to be disobedient to you. I want to express my love and my devotion to you. And it's not out of fear. Some people have if you grew up Catholic, this is often the case. You know, God's going to get you. And we know that the Lord chastens those whom He loves, right? But our motive is not that. You know, we don't have a nun slapping us over the back of the hand with something. We serve God because He loves us. We love Him in return. And our obedience comes from a place of God. You died for me. The least I can do is what? Live for you, right? And so that's our motivation there. Anybody have ever had animals in your house? Right? We right now have 2 dogs in the house. I like dogs. We one time had a cat. The most arrogant, condescending, pompous, snotty animal on the planet is a cat. You call a dog, hey, Bailey, let's go. Boy, right there. Melissa and I can take a walk without a leash, and Bailey will walk right there between us, just right there. Other dogs can be snapping and barking across the way, and they're yanking on their chest. And Bailey would just sit right there and just walk. Love that dog. Love that dog. We have another dog who's dumb as a brick. Her name's Bailey. She's black, but I think her roots are blonde. If you get what I'm saying, ha. She doesn't even know her name. But a cat just, you call a cat and it just, you know, we should be like Bailey and not like the old cat, if you know what I'm saying. Happy, you call a dog, and you tell it to do something, and its little tail's wagging. It's happy to obey, right? I'm so happy to be here, Daddy. Just, right? That should be our attitude. Just the wagging tail Christians, right? What is it? Saggy tail. I'll just leave that alone. We obey because our master loves us and we love the master. Oswald Chambers says this. He said it, he's gone to be with the Lord now. One step forward in obedience is worth years of study about it. Isn't that good? People spend their whole lives studying. And I saw something the other day that I thought was impressive. A guy graduates from seminary. He's got his nice new shiny MDiv degree there. And we put him in charge of a ministry rather than a man who's been teaching Sunday school for 40 years and has been obedient and had a walk with the Lord there. And the irony of that. A life of obedience, a trusted and proven, just pure obedience. There's something about that that's better than just having the head knowledge, obviously. So the first thing that Elijah learned was to obey the words that the Lord had spoken to him, and he went and did that. The second thing he learned was God's provision. God's provision. He learned at Cherith that concerning what God said, God would do. What God told him he would provide, he would provide. God had commanded Elijah to go and hide by that brook, Cherith, and then God would command the ravens to feed him there. Anybody here ever been fed by a bird? Of course not. This is a miracle, right? This is obviously, clearly, if birds come and bring you food, okay, if that's, that doesn't happen every day. That's a miracle. So he's getting food from the ravens. Miraculous, right? Where's he getting water? From the brook Cherith. So there is a natural provision from the brook, and there is a supernatural provision from the ravens, right? Sometimes God meets our needs in very ordinary ways. And I'll say usually that's the way he does it. Usually, and if we're not careful, we'll miss it. And we'll not recognize it as God's provision. I'm a self-made man. Let God take your breath, and you'll find out just how quickly you're not self-made. Let God take your mind, and you'll find out just how quickly how you're not self-made. Let God take your health and put you flat of your back. I'm sure you're like me. I often take my health for granted until I'm sick, and then my wife says I'm a big baby, right? We take these things for granted. God sometimes provides supernaturally, most of the time very naturally. Sometimes by the raven, usually by the brook, if you follow what I'm saying. You, though, probably like me, can look back at times in your life and you'd say, yeah, God provided because I went and got a job. And I got that paycheck, and I went to work, and I was faithful. And I got that job, and God used my mind, my strength, my energy, my effort, and God provided through a body that I gave in return for work, and he provided that way. But I can remember a time when job wasn't enough, and there would be extra special things that would show up, and you're like, where in the world did that come from? I remember back before we'd moved to Chicago, I was going to a Bible college, and I had no idea, but somebody was giving money through the church to give to me to help pay for Bible college. And I would get some money there, and I'd be like, and I started writing it down. I don't have that Bible anymore. I lost it one year when I was on tour, but I used to have that, and I had these dollar amounts and a date, $100 and a date written out beside it, $50 and a date written, just out of the blue, just like, wow, God is providing going to work, but God was providing in a supernatural way. I'm sure all of us have been at those times where we thought, unless you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and I don't know many people here that way, that you look back and you say, boy, God just, I went to the mailbox, and maybe we're in the house. And I've turned and looked at her, and I've said, have you ever missed a meal? We're going to take care of you. And God's providing through the brook called parents, right? The normal, natural way. I've looked at her, you've never missed a meal. I could probably afford to miss a few meals, that's for sure. But I've never missed a meal. I've never lacked anything that I actually needed. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells us not to worry about what we're going to drink or what we're going to wear. He said, you know what? That's what the Gentiles, the people who don't believe in me, that's what they worry about. He said, don't worry about those things. He said, listen, I know the number of hair on your head. Right? I know when a sparrow, a little him, by the way, a raven is considered in the Old Testament an unclean bird. Unclean bird. Sometimes God will use things that we don't, we're like, and he just uses simple folks. I get the impression that God likes simple folks because there's a whole bunch of us. You know what? George Mueller was an incredible man. In his youth, he was a punk. He even got put in jail back in the 1800s. But he got converted, and he felt God leading him to start orphanages all over England. He never one time shared the needs. This is before all the social safety nets and before everything that we have in the Western world today. But he never shared the needs to keep those orphanages up and running. He just simply committed everything to prayer, and that he believed that God would provide. At one time, there were 10,000 children under his care. He never asked for a dime. He never handed out flyers. He never put word out. He just simply prayed and trusted that God would meet the needs of all those kids there. I was reading 300 children were at one of his orphanages. And one morning, they had absolutely nothing to eat. So they were called to come in and sit down where they gathered for their meal and to give thanks. There was no food there. But they were told, we're going to bow our heads and we're going to close our eyes and we're going to thank God for the food. They sat down and they gave thanks. And when suddenly there was a knock on the door, and the baker who was there said, quote, "God has kept me awake all night, and I knew I had to bake an extra 3 batches of bread for you." So he brought in those 3 batches of bread. Then the milkman came past. You're not going to believe this, but as I read it to be true, as he's going past the orphanage, the wheel on his cart falls off of the cart. And all of that, this was before milk was pasteurized, right? So that milk had to be immediately delivered. And so he knocks on the door of the orphanage and said, "Before I can get this wheel repaired, do you all need any milk?" He said, "Because it's going to be bad before I can get it delivered." Lord, thank you for what's not there yet, but what showed up before they could ever say amen. You still believe in a God like that? A God of provision like Elijah had here? Being fed by birds, fed by ravens. Elijah learned about God's provision at the brook Cherith. He had water, but didn't have anything else, yet God provided. But what happens when the streams of provision dry up? What happens when the streams of provision dry up? 1 Kings chapter 17 and verse number 7. "And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land." Remember, he said it's not going to rain for 3.5 years. The third thing I want to point out is that God led Elijah to a brook that was drying up. He took him there. He led him to a place of provision, but that provision was not going to last. It was going to dry up. When he went there, there was a nice stream of water, plenty to drink. But because of the drought in the land, it dried up. The stream quickly turned to a trickle, then I'm sure to a puddle, then to maybe a handful of water, then a sip. So Elijah, he's been obedient. He's followed the Lord. Stay with me. He's been obedient. He's followed the Lord. He's at the place where God told him to go, and now the provision that had been there is no longer there. What do you do then? Now what? You ever been somewhere and you knew the Lord brought you to that place? And you're like, boy, this isn't working out the way I thought it was going to work out. It's kind of drying up. Maybe it's a financial situation. Maybe it's some other kind of situation. And you just knew that the Lord had led you to that. And now it's just like, boy, what, was I mistaken? Was I in the wrong place? Anybody else ever been there? I've been there a number of times. Why would God have led him to a place where the water would dry up? Now, Elijah could have thought that perhaps he should try to find a better place. Right? But, of course, that would have taken him to the place to where he was leaning on his own understanding instead of trusting what? In the Lord. And what Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 say? Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not where? To your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. When you look back on things that you see how God has worked in your life and you believe that he led you to that place and he's seen fit to take care of you like he did with Elijah, sometimes it's a test of faith. Sometimes it's that time where God says, you've been obedient so far, now it's time to test your faith. You remember a man named Abram who had a promised son? And through that promised son, God told him that all of the nations of the earth would be blessed. And then A little later, he said, I want you to take that boy. I want you to take him up on a mountain, and I want you to sacrifice him. What? The Bible's very clear that Moses believed that God would raise Isaac back to life. He had great confidence. He had provided for him. He'd given him a son. Abraham and Sarah had prayed and basically had given up. Remember, God had came to them in the tent, and she said, God told Abram, hey, you're going to have a child, and she's in the tent. What did she do? She laughed. He does. What in the world? I'm like old. I hadn't been able to conceive babies for years. I'm well past menopause. Right? But the baby was born. Did Abram argue with God? No. Isaac said, here's the fire. Here's the knife. Where's the lamb? Where's the sacrifice? And God said the Lord will provide himself a lamb. And he did. Sometimes God brings us to that place where he wants to test us. We grow, we start as the babes in Christ, and we see God work. By the way, if you got a need, get a babe in Christ to pray for your need. Because God seems to answer their prayers just almost like that. Because he's growing them quickly, and he's helping them to see that. But eventually God says, okay, you're going to learn some patience now. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not yet. Right? Sometimes God doesn't say no. Sometimes God says, just wait. And God had taken Elijah to that place of Cherith, to a place where the brook is going to dry up, and now that place is no longer a place of provision. Now it's a place of testing. A place of testing. Where God says, can you look back and see how I moved? And can you have faith to stay within my will? A lot of people in that place of testing, what do? They run to go find a better place. I know, can I say it this way? A lot of times pastors will go to a church. Everything go well for a while. And then they go through that tough time when the honeymoon's over. And every church and every pastor, they have that time where the honeymoon is over. You know, all of a sudden it's like, did you hear what he said Sunday? Can you believe what he said? It was absolutely freezing in that church Sunday. You know, before he's the greatest pastor in all the world, and we're so glad we're here. But the honeymoon wears off. A lot of pastors reach that point. Usually it's about 5 years in. You say, how long you've been here? A lot longer than 5 years. 11, 12 years now. But about 5 years, it's like he's kind of put up with them, and they've kind of put up with him. And instead of, he doesn't get a leading of the Lord. There's no clear, he knew God had brought him there, but now he's starting to look, starting to put his resume out, starting to be able to wonder if I could move to this area, that area. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a place of Cherith. It was a place of provision and blessing. As certain as you were that God brought you to that place, as certain as you were that God brought you to that place, don't move to the next place until you're equally as certain. Does that make sense? It's that place of Cherith. It first starts off as a place of blessing and a place of provision. Then it becomes a place of testing. Elijah demonstrated his complete dependence on God by waiting for him to tell him what to do next. It's actually at that crisis point where there's nothing left that the word of the Lord, nothing left that the word of the Lord came to him. I can't even read what I typed. God always moves when needed and never early. Always on time, that's what I mean. When needed, on time. We think late, but never early, right? I like things yesterday. How about you? I'll call a contractor. Hey, we need to get this taken care of. He said, when do you want it done? Yesterday, right? You know, I'm going to buy a more powerful microwave. I don't know if mine's getting weaker or not, but it cannot heat my coffee anymore in 30 seconds. Isn't that terrible? That's terrible. It's terrible. Impatient. And I want it now. I want it now. God doesn't work that way, though. If we have to, you go to a drive-through, McDonald's or someplace, I don't recommend it. I used to eat there and it wouldn't bother me. Now I eat there like 45 minutes, an hour later, I'm like, man, I feel horrible. But anyway, you go through there, can you pull around and wait at the number 1 stall? I'm like, are you kidding me? Maybe it'll change when I retire. I don't know, but no, it doesn't? Okay, all right. So you're still impatient as retirees? Good. All right, wonderful. Should Elijah have taken the bull by the horns, you might say, and run and found his own path? No. God's provision and blessing was at that place. Again, don't move until you know God's leading. I have commanded the ravens to feed him there. I got 2 minutes. Last thing. What if we see the hard times coming in advance? You got to know that Elijah didn't just wake up one morning and all of a sudden the brook was totally dry. Right? He saw what was happening. Day by day, that stream of water is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. He could see it. What do you do then? They that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up as wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. That is a hard place to be. When you see your health fading, when you see the health of your loved one fading, when you see a relationship getting further and further apart, when your adult child, and I'm learning that parenting adults is a whole lot harder than it is to parent little ones. And you see them make decisions and you feel like, I want to say something. Please come ask me. I have great wisdom I want to impart to you. And you see them making this, and you see it in wisdom of years says, don't do that. I know where that road's going. The brook's drying up, right? It can apply in a lot of different situations. That again is a time to trust the Lord. That is again a time to say, I am not going to move and step outside of the will of God. How many arguments could be avoided? How many fusses could be avoided if we would just Mama said, what? If you can't say something nice, what? Don't say anything at all. Oh, but how many times? But they just need to hear it. Right? Right? I can now empathize with, when I came here, my children were little. And I looked at you with your adult children, and I didn't understand. I understand now. And I'm like, come on. Because all we have now, I can't dictate. I can't demand. I can't slap their pudgy little hands anymore. All I have is influence. All I have is, will you allow me? And that's tough. Especially if there's an attitude. You say, Pastor, your kids? Come on, they're human beings just like your kids. Yeah.
You just have to hope that the wisdom you're impressed has taken hold.
You hope so, right? And that it didn't go in one ear and out the other, right? You know what they say about preachers' kids, though, right? PKs are the worst. Thank God God's blessed us with wonderful children, I have to say. But I'll say this. When you see it starting to dry up, that stream becomes a little bit of water and then a puddle and then just a little cupful, it's still time to wait. It's still time to trust. It's still time to lean on the Lord. Even when you see it slowly happening. Because most of the time, if you've lived long enough, you you notice trends. You begin to see things happening, right? Yeah, you do. If I had young people in front of me, I'd say, listen, I've been where you are. You've never been where I am, right? You ever said that to your kids? I've been 20. You've never been 50, right? Listen to me, right? And you can say that, but there's that delicate balancing act, right? Of I don't want to lose future influence by spending all my political capital now, if you will. All of my influence now. If I unload the truck today, they might not ever allow me to back up the truck ever again. And that's a balance, isn't it? Balance. When you see that brook drying up, you just trust. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the obedient, trusting, depending upon you example and model that we find in the prophet Elijah.